Thank you, Madam Chair. I know that this is basically the warm-up event for the next action item, so I'll be as economical as possible. Council Bill 21-907 moves the May election to April as the simple answer to a timing problem that we have that's basically been brought on by changes over the years in state and federal laws that require that ballots for military and overseas voters be mailed 45 days before an election. Of course, our runoff is either 28 or 35 days, depending on the calendar between May and June. And there are other deadlines that are post-election that cause some very compressed timeframes that in the worst of circumstances would not allow the election division to meet those timeframes if there were recounts or other types of things that happen after every election. This is the Uniformed and Overseas Citizens Absentee Voting Act, or UOCAVA. I remember one of the task force meetings I mistakenly said UOVACA, which prompted the clerk to ask me if I was talking about uniformed and overseas cows. So I appreciate the correction. Clerk Lopez established this 7-member charter review committee back in late summer of last year. We met 7 times. These are the individuals who were on the committee. We looked at many different things. We had presentations from clerks and elections officials from other cities between August and March. They were all virtual because of the pandemic. We looked at possibly moving the election to November, putting more time between the general and runoff, using approval voting or using ranked choice voting. The clerk's office also conducted a virtual town hall on all of these topics in February. The recommendations that came forth from the advisory committee were the first 4 bullets. First of all, it was right from the start, and Council President Gilmore was on the task force as well. It didn't seem that moving our election to November would be a good idea because of our budget cycle. We establish an annual budget on a calendar year, and that's why we have spring elections, so that the new council can make the budget for the following year. If a new council were to be elected in November, it would be subsequent to the development of the budget that the new mayor and the council would have to live under, and that simply doesn't work with our calendar. So it's similar to the state legislature. Their General Assembly is elected in November. They put the long bill together, and their fiscal year is July to June. So moving to November simply doesn't work with our other processes. 5 of the 7 members of the Charter Review Committee recommended the simple solution of simply moving the May election to April. 1 member recommended ranked choice voting. 1 member recommended approval voting. Clerk Lopez on June 30th forwarded 2 alternative recommendations, either of which he said he could make work, and that was to either move the May election to April or to adopt RCV. So this bill, after consultation individually with council members, I filed this bill to move the May general municipal to April. It resolves the insufficient timeframes. And most importantly, as we go forward with the presentation, I want you to see this. Most importantly, it preserves the charter requirement that all elected officials, except for the 2 at-large council members, must be elected by, quote, a majority of the votes cast. The 2-round runoff system is the only option that guarantees a winner of that process will receive a majority of the vote, and it allows us to retain the requirement to have a majority victor for mayor, clerk, auditor, and district council members. Runoffs also allow voters to focus on issues with the 2 finalists. It gives voters, more importantly also, voters who supported other candidates have the right to cast another ballot for the finalists in that last runoff election. So a little bit of background. It wouldn't be a Flynn presentation if I didn't have a little history. Denver voters established this runoff system in 1935 after 20 years of using a ranked choice voting system. Between 1913 and 1935, of course, we had a commission form for a brief period starting in 1913 to 1916 before the Spear Charter. We had a ranked choice voting variant that was called the Buckland system. It counted everyone's second and third choices if no one achieved a majority on the first round. So everyone's vote was counted in subsequent rounds of counting. The mayoral runoff was established in 1935 after this ranked choice system was used. I think in 5 elections, it elected Bob Spear, who died in office. It elected Ben Stapleton 3 times, and it elected a man by the name of Dewey Bailey once. And Dewey Bailey, if you look at your Denver history, is often regarded as one of our most corrupt mayors. That doesn't have anything to do with the election method that voted him, just had to do with the times, I guess, late 20s, 30s. The first time the runoff was actually used, however, in 1947, Quig Newton defeated Ben Stapleton outright in the first round in May. So the first time it was used was 1955 to elect Will Nicholson as mayor over the district attorney Burt Keating. Only a runoff system can increase voter turnout in the deciding round. I went through, and this shouldn't surprise anyone, but I went through all of the voting results from all of the elections back to the what we call the big change election, when Bill McNichols was defeated by not only by Federico Pena, but by Dale Tooley as well. He came in third, McNichols did. So since the 1983 Pena-Tooley mayoral election, most Denver runoff elections, 21 out of 38, have increased the number of voters in the runoff versus the May election. And I have the totals, a group of the totals in here. The largest increase in voter turnout from the May municipal to the runoff was when Bill Himmelman ran against Dick Feather in Council District 7 in South Denver, almost a 25% increase in voter turnout. With ranked choice voting, which was the other alternative recommended by the clerk's process, you can't have increased turnout because there's only one ballot. And as individuals may leave some blank, and in fact, in some variants of the instant runoff or ranked choice, you are asked to rank only 3, no matter how many are running. In some, you can rank, for instance, in Councilman Clark's race in 2015, 9 candidates. In one variant, you would have 9 by 9, but in some of them, you would be asked to rank only 3. So it is not only likely, it's certain that in some of these systems, you will leave blank many of the candidates. So as each round of tabulating in RCV continues, voters' ballots are eliminated from the final count. So why not RCV? First of all, the problem with UO-CAVA can be resolved very simply by slipping the date. That's how many states and cities have resolved the very same problem. They just simply put 2 months instead of 1 month between the 2 elections. And so it's the simplest method to solve the only problem we've identified at hand. RCV, however, would require that we repeal the Denver Charter requirement that the mayor, auditor, clerk, and district council members must be elected by a majority of votes cast. In fact, the draft ordinance that was presented for our consideration literally struck out that section of each office holder's charter section, struck out the requirement that you must be elected by a majority. As you can see in some of the research I presented under these sub-bullets, 26 RCV decided races in San Francisco for supervisor, which is their version of city council, all but one failed to achieve a true majority. All of them, except for one, never hit 50%. In the most extreme case, there was a candidate for a supervisor seat who was named on only 21.1% of the ballots, and most of them were second or third choices. And that candidate took that seat with only 21% of the vote. All 6 mayoral contests in San Francisco, Oakland, and Minneapolis that resorted to RCV, not all of them did, sometimes they won outright on the first round, but all 6 mayoral races that were decided by RCV failed to yield a majority winner. One reached only 48.5% at the end of 33 rounds of counting from those ballots. The problem basically is ballot exhaustion, which disenfranchises voters who don't rank all the candidates. As I mentioned, in some of the systems that are recommended, you can only rank 3, no matter how many are running. If you don't rank any of the 3 that remain at the end, it is as though you didn't vote at all. You don't count in the final denominator, those numbers are taken out. In that San Francisco election I mentioned, 3 out of every 5 voters for that supervisor seat were not counted in the final tally. 60% of the votes did not count. I can't imagine electing a mayor of Denver with 60% of the ballots that were actually cast not being counted. So When we see the literature on RCV, it is very, very effective in highly partisan contests because it neutralizes what they call the spoiler effect in plurality contests. Typically, RCV is adopted by jurisdictions that are going from a pure plurality election model, which is whoever gets the most votes wins, no matter if 10 candidates run and the winner got only 15%. That's not a good system. That's the one we changed from back in 1913. We don't want to go back to that. So if RCV had been in use in Florida in 2000, most people think that Al Gore would have been president because people who voted for Nader as their favorite choice might have opted for Al Gore as their second choice. We'll never know. On the other hand, in 1992, George H.W. Bush might have won a second term if the nation had used RCV and people who voted for Ross Perot could have chosen George H.W. Bush as their second choice. Bill Clinton never would have been president. So when you have high extremes in highly partisan races, RCV is a very good tool to look at. Municipal elections in Colorado, most of municipal elections in Colorado, not all, but most of them are nonpartisan, like ours, and they're neighborhood level. And we don't really have that spoiler effect that RCV is seeking to solve. So the schedule from here is committee, and I asked members to vote it out to the floor. Mayor Council on the 17th, first reading the 23rd, second reading on August 30th, and then on November 2nd, Election Day. And Madam Chair, with your indulgence, I'd like to ask Clerk Lopez to come up and talk about the process and the public engagement that his office operated. Would that be all right?
That'd be great. Thank you.
Thanks. Clerk?